I have to tell you, I looked out the window this morning and immediately felt the energy just drain right out of me.
Oh, I know that feeling.
The sky was just so utterly dismal. You know, that heavy gray ceiling that seems to weigh down on the entire city.
Mm-hmm.
It hardly inspires one to leap out of bed and, tackle a massive stack of research.
It's an incredibly powerful feeling, isn't it? And that involuntary response you described is, I think, key to our entire deep dive today.
How so?
Well, it's peculiar, the almost profound impact the weather can have on our psyche before we've even consciously processed what the forecast is.
It truly is. I find a bright, crisp morning, maybe 10 degrees Celsius, slightly breezy, feels immediately invigorating.
Right.
I'm mentally ready to run a marathon. But a dreary, relentless, rainy day just leaves me feeling sluggish.
Like you're wading through mud before you've even had breakfast.
Exactly. It dictates the entire mood.
Which brings us directly to the heart of the matter. We are diving deep into the seemingly, mundane topic of weather conversation.
Right.
But we're really analyzing its role as a crucial and really sophisticated element of English social interaction.
Now, some of you listening might be thinking, wait, the weather? Isn't that elementary?
I learned sunny, cloudy, and rainy in my first class.
Precisely. What more is there to say? And that's the paradox we're here to explore. We'd argue that mastering the discussion of atmospheric conditions with precision is one of the quickest shortcuts to achieving advanced fluency.
And cultural competence. We
Yeah.
call it the quintessential social lubricant.
That's a great term for it.
Think about its function. The weather is the safest, most universal, and most shared conversational ground you can find in almost any English-speaking culture.
You don't need to know anything about the person next to you.
Not their job, their politics, their life history. Nothing. You can connect on the basis of the shared climate.
It eliminates all that conversational risk. It serves as the perfect entry point.
Mm-hmm.
You could be standing next to a complete stranger in a queue or waiting for a meeting to start, and a simple remark.
Dreadful weather we're having, isn't it?
Exactly. And it's instantly accepted as the valid opening to a dialogue. It facilitates connection without demanding any vulnerability from either person.
And this is particularly true in places where the weather is notoriously variable, like the UK.
Oh, for sure.
The sources we looked at highlight that in Britain, weather talk is practically a national pastime. It's not just small talk.
It's an elaborate, coded system of connection.
Yeah. Contrast that, as you said, with the social faux pas of trying to open with a highly personal question.
Or a controversial political viewpoint. No.
No, the simple phrase, bit nippy out today, or are we ever going to see the sun again, serves as this universally accepted low-stakes entry point.
And the beauty of it is once you've broken the ice with the weather, you can then transition much more easily into deeper, more substantive conversation.
So our mission today is, I think, pretty ambitious. We're moving beyond the simple functional vocabulary.
Way beyond.
We're aiming to equip you with the highly sophisticated adjectives, nouns, and idiomatic expressions needed to discuss the weather with the precision, color, and cultural nuance of a truly advanced speaker.
We want to transform the way you perceive, describe, and ultimately discuss the sky above you.
Okay, let's unpack this language.
Right, so we're moving from the philosophical why of weather talk, its role as a social necessity, to the practical how.
Exactly.
And I think we should start with the simplest, most visceral concept: temperature. We all know hot and cold, but these are, linguistically speaking, blunt instruments.
Very blunt. We need to upgrade to specialized tools. The goal, when describing temperature, is for the precision of the language to match the exact physical sensation the weather is imposing on you.
You need to convey the type of discomfort, not just the number on the thermometer.
Precisely. Let's start with the extreme heat spectrum, because the distinctions there are vital.
Okay, so we begin with scorching. To me, that's very hot, implying intense, direct sunshine.
Yes, often drying the air and baking the ground. The intensity comes from the sun itself. But then we move into the heat that feels fundamentally harder to bear.
Which would be sweltering.
Exactly. The word sweltering is crucial because it introduces the element of humidity and discomfort. It doesn't just mean a high temperature.
No.
It implies that heavy, sticky, airless heat where your clothes cling to you. It describes the physical state of being hot and sweaty, usually because there's no air movement.
So if someone says it's sweltering, they're communicating misery linked to humidity, not just the sun's rays.
You've got it. That distinction is key.
So if I say the desert sun was scorching,
Yeah.
that's dry heat. But if I say the subway platform was sweltering, That's humid, stagnant heat.
That is the perfect distinction, and if that stifling heat intensifies even further, we reach the point where it becomes oppressive.
Now oppressive is a fascinating term because it carries so much psychological weight.
It does. It suggests something overwhelming, physically crushing. It can make it feel difficult to breathe or move easily.
It's a word borrowed from, politics or social control.
It is. So when English speakers describe the weather as oppressive, they're inherently expressing this sense of profound powerlessness.
Like the atmosphere itself is a restrictive force.
A force beyond our control. That's the depth we're talking about. It's not just a word, it's an emotional statement.
Okay, sticking with the heat, what about the kind that settles in during the evening?
That often leads us to sultry. Sultry usually refers to air that is hot, heavy, and moist. It's often associated with late summer afternoons or evenings where a storm might be brewing.
It has a kind of drowsy, sensuous discomfort to it.
Yes, you might say, it was a sultry summer night, making it impossible to sleep.
And what if the heat is just utterly fierce burning? We sometimes hear blistering.
Blistering conveys a kind of aggressive, intense heat, a heat that feels like it could literally damage the skin.
It's almost an aggressive adjective.
It is. It signals real severity, like the sun beat down with blistering intensity.
So if I'm standing there dealing with this sweltering, sultry, oppressive discomfort, what is the one thing I'm desperate for?
A breeze.
Yes.
If you say, I can't stand this oppressive heat, I'm desperate for a bit of a breeze, you are specifically asking for that gentle, pleasant wind.
Just that minimal movement of air that breaks the static, suffocating heat.
It's always a welcome term. Always.
Okay, let's flip the script. Let's go to the cold side and apply the same rigor. We need to move beyond just saying it's cold.
Absolutely. At the mild, manageable end of the cold spectrum, we start with chilly or nippy.
I like those terms because they're slightly diminutive. They signal that the cold is noticeable but not, serious.
Right.
You might say, it's a bit nippy out today, meaning a light jacket or just quickening your step will be enough. It's manageable.
Exactly. But when that cold intensifies, we move immediately to bitterly cold. This suggests a severe cold, often associated with a sharp wind, a cold that starts to feel physically painful, stinging the exposed skin.
The word bitterly adds that emotional dimension to the cold, much like oppressive does to the heat. It suggests a certain harshness.
It does. If someone says, don't forget your gloves, it's bitterly cold out there, they are stressing the sharpness of the air, not just the temperature reading.
And what about that cold that isn't just sharp, but damp? The kind that seems to seep right into your bones.
We describe that as raw.
Raw cold. That's a term you hear a lot in coastal or oceanic climates, right? It's that damp, penetrating cold that feels unhealthy.
It is. It's the cold that comes with humidity, making the temperature feel far lower than it actually is.
And speaking of feeling lower than it actually is, we have to talk about wind chill.
Yes, that's not a description of the temperature itself, but the effect of wind combined with cold on the skin.
So you might hear the forecast say, the temperature is only -5, but the wind chill makes it feel like -15.
And that's vital context. We're describing the perceived reality, not just the measurement.
And then finally, the absolute extremes of cold.
Well, we have freezing, which is unambiguous, implying temperatures near or below the freezing point of water. And for truly staggering, life-threatening cold, you might use Arctic.
Arctic. That instantly conveys a sense of extreme, uninhabitable cold, often linked to ice and snow.
So the core lesson here is choice. The advanced learner has to move past hot and cold and select the word that exactly matches the context and the physical sensation.
Are you experiencing sticky, sweltering discomfort or the damp, raw sting of bitterly cold air?
That distinction shows true fluency and real observational skill.
Excellent. So we've covered the visceral feeling of temperature. Now let's shift our focus to the visual and atmospheric aspects.
The state of the sky and the intensity of precipitation.
This is where we start to paint a picture with our vocabulary moving beyond the simple, it's not sunny.
Right, because so many days exist in this state of suspended animation. They aren't clear and bright, but they aren't actively stormy either.
And we need a sophisticated vocabulary for that in-between state where the sky itself influences our mood.
So when the entire sky is covered by clouds without any visible breaks, we call that overcast.
It's a technical, straightforward description, but essential for daily conversation.
An overcast often sets the stage for the more subjective descriptions. A day that is persistently overcast starts to feel gloomy.
Gloomy.
Yeah.
That suggests a general depressing, dark, or ill-lit atmosphere. It carries that psychological weight we talked about.
That sense that the lack of sunlight is affecting morale and your overall outlook.
And if that state of gloom persists for days or weeks, the conditions start to feel dreary.
Dreary is a great descriptor. It implies monotony and tedium, usually caused by long-term gloom, dampness, and low light.
So you might use it to describe an entire month. January was relentless. The weather was utterly dreary.
Exactly.
And what about low-lying visibility that isn't quite fog? We often talk about the air being misty.
Misty describes light precipitation or water vapor suspended in the air that reduces visibility, often associated with a very light drizzle. It's less severe than fog, but adds a soft, damp quality to the atmosphere.
Okay, so let's talk about the inevitable, precipitation. The intensity of the rain changes the descriptive language entirely.
It does. We need a detailed spectrum for rain, moving from barely noticeable to, well, catastrophic.
Starting at the light end, we have drizzle.
Light rain, often misty, sometimes barely requiring an umbrella. It's more annoying than it is soaking.
It's the rain you debate whether or not to put your hood up for.
That's it exactly. But the real fun begins when the rain gets heavy. And here, contemporary English has shifted dramatically toward more active, less formal expressions.
Right, so if it's truly heavy rain, the most frequent dynamic phrases you'll hear are, "It's bucketing it down."
Or its close cousin. It's absolutely lashing it down. Both convey significant intensity.
A high volume of water falling with speed and force. They're very visceral and immediate.
If someone uses these, they're signaling that you will get wet instantly. No question.
And then we move to the nouns that describe volume. A sharp, heavy burst of rain, often short in duration, is a downpour.
A downpour suggests sudden intensity. And if the rain is continuous, severe, and potentially associated with flooding, we use torrential.
Torrential rain. That implies a massive volume, like a torrent of water coming from the sky.
Which brings us to the famous, but arguably dated idiom.
It's raining cats and dogs. It's famous, yes, but I want to spend a moment clarifying its use for advanced learners.
I think that's important. It's essential vocabulary for recognition, but less so for production, especially in casual contemporary settings.
Right.
While the phrase is still used, particularly by older generations, its origins are so murky and fantastical, it feels a bit theatrical compared to the modern alternatives.
Yeah, the sources suggest that in contemporary fast-paced conversation, using bucketing it down or lashing it down signals natural, immediate fluency.
Whereas using cats and dogs signals that you're referencing a well-known fixed phrase,
Which can sometimes break the flow of a natural conversation.
the key takeaway is recognition is mandatory, but active usage of the more dynamic, modern terms often creates a smoother, more immediate impact.
Okay, so we can't neglect the wind. Wind strength is critical to describing the overall condition.
A day characterized by strong, turbulent winds is described as blustery. This isn't a hurricane, but the wind is strong enough to be disruptive and noticeable.
It might make it difficult to walk in a straight line or close a car door easily.
And often, winds don't blow at a steady speed. They come in sudden, brief increases.
That's gusty wind.
Yes, the wind comes in gusts, and the constant start and stop nature of gusty winds is often more frustrating than a steady, strong wind.
And if the wind is approaching true storm levels, we call it gale force.
Gale force winds are serious, often causing structural damage or dangerous sea conditions.
And this detail about strong wind leads us directly back to a universal anecdotal struggle.
Yes.
The attempt to use an umbrella on a blustery or gusty day, it is, as source material noted, a truly futile endeavor.
That word, futile, pointless, incapable of producing any useful result, it perfectly captures the mood of fighting the elements when they are against you.
It really does. It adds a sophisticated layer of shared misery to the conversation.
You're not just saying your umbrella broke. You're lamenting the utter pointlessness of the human effort against the power of nature.
And that's where the language truly elevates. It's integrating high-level, almost philosophical vocabulary, like futile and oppressive, into the mundane, universal context of weather.
It transforms simple observation into sophisticated commentary.
Now that we can describe current conditions with great precision, from blistering heat to torrential rain, let's move into the realm of prediction.
Right. We're transitioning from what is happening now to discussing future forecasts and, crucially, the language used for expressing uncertainty.
Discussing the forecast is perhaps the most practical element of weather conversation. It drives our planning, our travel, our wardrobe choices.
And you need specific structures to inquire about and share those predictions, both formally and informally.
So when inquiring, the structures remain pretty simple. What's the forecast for tomorrow? Or what does the weather report say?
The reporting language, however, has layers. The common, everyday way is quick and casual. It's supposed to rain later.
But to sound more authoritative, or to attribute the prediction to an official source, we use a stronger construction. The forecast calls for.
Calls for. Yes, this phrase attributes the prediction to a reliable analytical source. For instance, the forecast calls for intermittent showers this afternoon.
And notice the word choice there, intermittent. This is C1 vocabulary replacing the simpler off and on.
Intermittent elevates the description of the rain pattern, indicating periods of cessation between periods of activity.
We also need terms for the duration. If we're talking about the next hour or two, that's the immediate forecast. But what about the next week or month?
That's the outlook. You might hear, the outlook for the rest of the week is unsettled. The outlook signals a broader, less precise prediction covering a longer time frame.
Okay. However, as anyone living in a temperate climate knows, forecasts are frequently unreliable.
Oh, yes. And this unreliability itself introduces some of the most valuable, expressive vocabulary. This is where we discuss the concept of volatility.
The weather can be incredibly unpredictable, and the key high-level vocabulary word here is
Capricious.
That's a word that really captures the frustration. Let's spell that out for everyone. C-A-P-R-I-C-I-O-U-S.
And it means given to sudden, unaccountable changes in mood or behavior. It's usually reserved for describing fickle people or fate itself.
And that is precisely why it perfectly describes the weather in so many parts of the world. It suggests the atmospheric conditions are acting on a whim.
Without reason, making them impossible to rely on, the weather is prone to inexplicable, frustrating shifts.
A slightly less severe but related term is fickle.
Fickle also describes changeability and instability, but maybe with a lighter, less dramatic connotation than capricious.
So a friend who often changes plans is fickle. The weather that brings hail 5 minutes after sunshine is capricious.
That's a great way to put it. And when the weather changes that rapidly, we also describe it as volatile.
This inherent unpredictability, this capricious nature, gives rise to a popular and highly evocative expression.
We're having 4 seasons in one day.
Yes. This phrase is universally understood to mean that you've experienced a maddening rapidity of shifts.
One moment it's spring-like and mild, the next you're being hit by hail, a sudden winter storm, and then 5 minutes later the summer sun is back out again.
It perfectly captures the frustration when trying to choose an outfit. You leave the house prepared for autumn, only to experience summer, then winter, and then back to spring, all before lunch.
It's a cultural shorthand for meteorological instability.
And understanding and using terms like capricious in this expression matters so much because it allows you to express precise frustration.
It's the difference between saying the weather changed a lot today and saying the weather was so capricious that we felt we experienced 4 seasons in one day.
The latter is richer, more expressive, and far more advanced. It summarizes the power of this vocabulary. By assigning a personality to the weather, we elevate the discussion from mere reporting to cultural commentary.
Now we transition into the part of the language that is purely metaphorical.
This is where weather words are borrowed wholesale to describe human conditions, emotions, or complex social situations.
This integration of meteorological language into emotional and social contexts is the real hallmark of deep cultural fluency. We are no longer talking about clouds or wind.
No, we're using them as proxies for psychological or situational states.
Let's start with the most common euphemism in English.
Feeling under the weather.
This is a classic polite phrase. It is the go-to way of saying you're feeling unwell or slightly sick without having to go into detail about your symptoms.
And the origin is fascinating.
It is. It's thought to derive from old nautical usage. When sailors felt seasick, they would be moved below deck, literally under the weather deck, to rest.
So it suggests a low-grade indisposition, a general feeling of being below par. I don't think I'll make it tonight. I'm feeling a bit under the weather.
It's gentle, polite, and avoids oversharing. Perfect.
Next, let's explore an idiom rooted firmly in optimism.
Every cloud has a silver lining.
This expression is beautiful because it acknowledges the negative reality, the metaphorical cloud. while insisting on the potential for good.
It's a mechanism for shifting perspective, for focusing on finding a modicum of positivity in adversity. The imagery is strong.
The sun shining behind a rain cloud, illuminating the edges.
That silvery glow that promises better things. For example, I was disappointed the concert was canceled, but every cloud has a silver lining. Now I have time to finish my book.
The silver lining is the unexpected free time.
Our third idiom focuses on conflict or controversy. A storm in a teacup.
I find the visualization of this idiom is its greatest strength. A hurricane confined to a tiny teacup.
It perfectly illustrates a disproportionate reaction. It refers to a situation where people get very angry or worried about something that is fundamentally trivial and unimportant.
It's excellent for dismissing overreactions, office gossip, petty squabbles.
If someone says, the whole argument was just a storm in a teacup, it'll be forgotten by tomorrow, they are asserting that the emotional intensity did not match the minimal gravity of the issue.
And fourth, a powerful one that connects a weather metaphor directly to resilience.
To weather the storm.
This means, metaphorically, to survive a difficult period or to get through a crisis. It implies perseverance, grit, survival against adversity.
The context is often high stakes. The company is going through a tough financial period, but the CEO is confident they can weather the storm.
It shows how foundational this vocabulary is to expressing concepts of endurance and human struggle.
Let's add a few more to expand our arsenal. What about an idiom for postponement?
To take a rain check. I hear this all the time.
Right. It means to decline an offer or invitation now, but politely suggest that you'll accept it at a later date.
And it comes from baseball, right?
Exactly. If a game was interrupted by rain, spectators were given a rain check, a ticket to attend a future game for free.
And now it's applied to everything from coffee dates to business meetings. I can't meet this week, but let me take a rain check on that.
Okay, next, an idiom about anticipation that uses weather as a dramatic backdrop.
The calm before the storm.
This is used to describe a quiet, peaceful, or deceptively stable period that immediately precedes a time of great turmoil or conflict.
It suggests apprehension and expectation of impending trouble. So if you see your normally tyrannical boss being unusually pleasant one morning,
you might whisper, I think this is the calm before the storm. Something terrible is about to happen.
Exactly. And finally, a great action-oriented idiom.
To throw caution to the wind.
This is all about risk-taking. It means to act recklessly, heedlessly, or without regard for potential consequences.
You are literally throwing your carefulness, your caution to the unpredictable wind.
After months of careful saving, she suddenly decided to throw caution to the wind and book a spontaneous trip around the world.
The key realization here for you, the learner, is that by integrating these specific idioms, you are not just translating a meaning.
No, you're demonstrating cultural fluency. You're speaking in the same metaphors that shape native conversation and thought processes.
Okay, so we have spent time isolating the vocabulary, analyzing the temperature spectrum, precipitation, the metaphors.
Now for the ultimate test, putting it all together. We need to demonstrate how this advanced language is integrated naturally to make it sound dynamic and real.
We've moved from the list of ingredients to the finished meal. We'll analyze a short, imagined dialogue between two colleagues in an office kitchen, noting how the advanced terms elevate the exchange.
Okay, listen to the opening. It immediately integrates the misery we discussed.
Wow, this downpour is absolutely relentless, isn't it? I'm absolutely drenched just walking from the car park.
Downpour and relentless are key there. Downpour signifies the volume, and relentless means persistent, harsh, continuous.
It's not a passing shower, it's an assault. And drenched is the precise consequence soaked through.
It conveys deep physical misery and intensity in a single, efficient sentence.
Then the reply immediately challenges the forecast and escalates the vocabulary. The weather report called for light drizzle, not this torrential deluge. I thought the forecast was supposed to be sunny, even balmy.
Torrential deluge, that's superb. Deluge is a high-level synonym for heavy downpour, and torrential multiplies the severity. And it contrasts so sharply with the expected light drizzle. That use of contrast shows sophisticated word choice.
And they introduced two new terms there. Called for, that formal prediction language, and balmy.
Balmy, meaning pleasantly warm and mild. It expresses a positive expectation, which makes the reality of the deluge even more frustrating.
The conversation continues, integrating our point about the futility of fighting nature. I made a futile attempt with my umbrella, but the blustery wind just turned it inside out.
And sent it flying into a puddle. Notice how the descriptive terms stack up naturally. You have the specific strong wind, blustery, creating the condition.
And the resulting action, futile, describing the failure of the response. The speaker isn't just saying, my umbrella broke. They are lamenting the pointlessness of the entire attempt.
It suggests a level of despair.
Then the first colleague pivots by immediately applying a strategic idiom to lighten the mood.
Well, I suppose every cloud has a silver lining. At least we're inside now, and the prospect of a hot coffee is immensely appealing.
That is the perfect social function of that phrase. It's used instantly to pivot toward optimism and comfort after the shared misery.
It's a linguistic tool for emotional regulation within the dialogue.
The first colleague then shifts the subject to their weekend plans, connecting the current conditions to future apprehension. I was worried this gloomy, dreary weather would put a damper on our plans for the team outing this weekend.
Here we have two more advanced concepts. The atmospheric description, gloomy, dreary, is used to explain the worry.
And to put a damper on plans is a vital weather-related phrase that means to negatively affect or lessen enthusiasm. It implies disappointment due to the adverse conditions.
The second colleague responds with determination. Not a chance. We're going come rain or shine. We need to get out of this office.
Come rain or shine, a declaration of unwavering intent. It means regardless of the circumstances.
It defines the plan as fixed, regardless of meteorological outcomes. It signals real commitment.
Then the conversation takes a philosophical turn, acknowledging the inherent unreliability of predictions. I'm still looking forward to it. The outlook for Saturday, despite this current deluge, is surprisingly clear.
And the final line has to connect back to the overriding theme of volatility. The hope for a clear outlook is immediately undercut by skepticism.
Let's hope the capricious nature of our regional climate doesn't prove that forecast wrong. You never know when the calm before the storm might end.
That is synthesis in action. They've used the high-level term capricious to express their underlying skepticism about the positive forecast.
And they've connected the formal reporting term, outlook, with the cultural expectation of weather volatility, and then used calm before the storm to hint at potential impending chaos.
So the key lesson is it's not about memorizing lists.
Not at all. It's about how these terms, relentless, drenched, torrential deluge, futile, balmy, capricious, flow together to create conversations that are rich in precision, color, and cultural nuance.
They tell a story about the experience, rather than just relaying data. They allow you to discuss the weather, yes, but in a way that reveals your mastery of the language itself.
And that brings us to the end of this deep dive.
Let's just quickly reinforce the core achievements we've covered today.
You, the listener, have moved far beyond the fundamental terms. You now possess an integrated vocabulary for temperature, precipitation, wind, and volatility.
You can differentiate between sweltering and sultry heat, the raw cold versus the bitterly cold, and you can use dynamic verbs like lashing and sophisticated nouns like deluge.
More importantly, you've absorbed the metaphorical language, the powerful idioms that allow weather conversation to transcend meteorology.
And address complex human situations, whether you are feeling under the weather, navigating a storm in a teacup, or confident you can weather the storm of a crisis.
This skill is absolutely critical for elevating your English to a truly advanced level. It provides a means to add cultural depth and complexity to your speech.
It transforms what is often considered mundane small talk into a genuine opportunity for detailed, expressive communication.
Okay, so here is our final implication and application, a genuine challenge for you to undertake on your own time.
This is how you move these words from your intellectual knowledge bank into automatic, fluent usage.
When you next observe the weather, or even when you observe a disagreement between two people, just stop. Move beyond the simple description. Actively try to integrate one of the more advanced adjectives or idioms we discussed.
For instance, don't just say, it's really hot, but maybe the humidity is making it utterly oppressive.
When a petty argument breaks out at work, ask yourself, is this merely a storm in a teacup?
Or if you see a friend postponing a commitment, note that they chose to take a rain check.
Practice using terms like gloomy or capricious to describe the atmosphere, whether literal or figurative. This deliberate integration is how vocabulary moves from being intellectual knowledge to fluent, automatic conversational habit.
Stay curious, keep practicing, and recognize that even the most common topic, the weather, can unlock the highest levels of linguistic mastery.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the art of advanced weather conversation.
We look forward to having you back soon. Okay, so for today's deep dive, we're doing something a little different.
Yeah, a bit of a shift.
We're stepping away from, the usual topics, history, complex technology, that sort of thing.
Right.
And we're looking at something a bit more elemental, the very air we breathe.
And maybe more importantly, how we talk about it, the language we use to capture it.
Exactly. We are diving into the poetics of weather. We're going to be exploring how language, how it captures not just what the weather is, but how it feels.
Yes, that sensory experience.
Yeah.
And the psychological impact, which is huge.
It's a really fascinating assignment for us. I mean, for anyone who's aiming for what we call that pinnacle of fluency, that ability to communicate mood, emotion, cultural subtext.
Yeah.
Understanding this stuff is, it's critical.
It really is. We have to move beyond just saying, it's raining or it's cold.
Right.
We want to get into how weather feels, how it sounds, even how it smells, and how that vocabulary ends up shaping everything from classic literature to just everyday conversation.
And our sources for this are, they're less about meteorology, really.
Right, for sure.
They're more about semantics, psychology, and narrative craft. We're going to try and synthesize all of this to give you, the listener, a much richer layer of understanding.
So you can see how a simple weather description can be a really potent emotional signal.
Yeah. So where do we start with something so vast?
Well, I think the best place to start to really hook you in is with one specific word.
Oh, which one?
Petrichor.
Ah, petrichor, yes. I love this word. It's that smell, isn't it? After it rains on really dry ground.
That is exactly the smell. Everyone knows it, but very few people realize it actually has a name, a proper scientific name.
It's so much more than just wet dirt.
So much more. And this is where the source material gets really interesting. Petrichor is chemically driven.
Okay.
That unique scent is caused mostly by a compound called geosmin.
Geosmin.
Yeah, geosmin. It's a byproduct from common soil bacteria, specifically a type called actinobacteria. So when the soil is dry, these bacteria produce spores.
And then the rain hits.
And the rain hits the ground, and it kicks up these tiny little aerosol droplets that contain the spores and the geosmin.
So when we smell petrichor, we're literally smelling a chemical compound being released by bacteria.
You're smelling bacteria responding to water.
Yeah, that's incredible. But why do so many people find that smell so comforting? It seems to evoke this universal feeling of relief.
Well, that's where the analysis gets really deep, right? Some theories point to an evolutionary link.
You mean like for our ancestors?
Exactly. For early humans, rain meant the end of a drought. It meant crops would grow, life would continue, survival. So that smell became deeply, almost genetically linked to a positive outcome.
It's an inherited sense of relief.
It's an inherited sense of relief, hardwired into us. The word itself, or just the smell, can instantly place you in that specific moment, the breaking of a dry spell.
And that kind of precise sensory vocabulary, that's the key, isn't it? If we can get the mood from geosmin, we could definitely get it from a specific kind of wind or fog.
And unlocking that richness is exactly what we're setting out to do today.
Okay, so let's move from smell to sound. Because weather it's inherently noisy.
Absolutely.
And the way we describe that noise just fundamentally changes the emotional register of a scene. I mean, sound is probably the fastest way to set a mood.
It is. The acoustic environment, as the sources call it, created by something as simple as rain, offers this entire spectrum of moods. Just think about the sheer variety of words we have for rain sounds.
Well, you mentioned the obvious one in the outline, the soft pitter-patter of light rain on a window.
Right, the pitter-patter.
What's the specific mood there? What does that word do?
Pitter-patter is, it's highly rhythmic, it's low energy, so it suggests comfort, being indoors, coziness.
Right, it implies you're safe inside looking out.
Exactly. There's a boundary between you and the elements, but the elements are mild. They're not threatening. It's the perfect sound for, quiet contemplation or a scene of domestic intimacy.
But if we just ramp up the intensity a tiny bit, the language has to change.
Oh.
You might go from pitter-patter to, say, a steady drip or a plink.
And see how that immediately introduces a feeling of anxiety.
Yeah, totally.
Pitter-patter is charming. A persistent drip suggests something is wrong. A leak, water getting in, maybe damage.
It's irritating.
Yeah.
It's that one little sound that just chips away at your peace of mind. A very different psychological effect.
A completely different effect. And then, of course, you move into the world of a real storm. You get the low-frequency rumble of distant thunder.
That deep bass sound.
And that's significant because you often feel it as much as you hear it. It suggests just immense power and mass.
And the fact that it's distant is key, right? It builds anticipation. The threat is approaching, but slowly.
It's the musical equivalent of a big, sustained, ominous chord in a movie score. It signals that something is coming. Impending doom, maybe?
And the contrast to that is the sharp, sudden, high-energy crack of nearby lightning.
That's the climax, the payoff to the anticipation. It's instantaneous, it's violent, it's right here.
If the rumble is the slow dread, the crack is the jump scare.
Perfectly put. And an author or filmmaker chooses which one to emphasize. Are they building slow, mounting dread with the rumble? Or do they want immediate, visceral danger with the crack? That one-word choice basically manages your heartbeat for you.
That is exactly what we mean by the poetics of weather. Okay, let's talk about wind, because a simple movement of air can become this huge narrative element just based on the verb you choose.
The way we personify wind is just a masterclass in this. You know, if you just say the wind was blowing, that's pretty inert. It's a simple description.
But if you say the wind was howling...
Now it has a voice.
Yeah, and it's a dramatic one. It's mournful, maybe tragic. You're projecting human sorrow onto an element.
Precisely. The howling wind is a staple of Gothic literature for a reason. It's not just air moving, it's crying out. It reflects loneliness, suffering, the isolation of the setting. You put a howling wind around an old, isolated manor.
And you're signaling that the safety of the house is under attack, that this relentless, sorrowful force is trying to get in.
It gives the wind agency. It's a living, suffering, sometimes even malevolent entity.
And that is completely different from a wind that is whistling.
Totally different. Whistling is shrill. It's sharp. Now, you brought up an interesting point when we were prepping for this.
Oh, about the playful context.
Yeah. You mentioned that a whistling wind could be used in, say, a children's book, like it's a mischievous character.
Right, which it can be, if it's light and fleeting.
True. But our sources really emphasize its use in older, more serious fiction as something unnatural, eerie.
Because it implies the wind is being forced through a tiny opening.
Exactly. A keyhole, a crack in a window pane. It creates this high-pitched sound that just sets your nerves on edge because it feels invasive. It's an intrusion.
A small, penetrating sound that cuts through everything else.
Think about the sound a bullet makes or an arrow. It's often described as a whistle. It's associated with speed and imminent impact.
So the choice of howling or whistling really dictates whether the reader should feel a kind of profound sadness or a sharp nervous anxiety.
And there's so many other textures, too. I mean, think about a wind that soughs.
Soughs, that's a great word. S-O-U-G-H-S.
It's a much softer verb. It suggests a low, murmuring, almost sighing sound, usually through trees, like pine needles.
Though less dramatic than howling.
Much less. It's more mysterious, more continuous. It's the sound of, a deep, quiet melancholy or even something ancient.
Or what about a storm that crashes, that feels so aggressive?
Right. Crashing implies something is breaking. It could be waves against a cliff or the very structure of the house against the force of the elements. It's massive and violent.
It's incredible how these words, howling, whistling, soughing, rumbling, they're emotional shorthand. They make you hear the character of the environment, and they set the tone instantly.
It's an instant cinematic mood setter. You don't need a paragraph of explanation.
Okay, so moving beyond sound, let's talk about the physical sensation of the air itself, the feel of it.
Yes, and this is where we have to get much more descriptive than just hot or cold. The vocabulary here gets really, really textural.
You're talking about the texture of the air, not just the number on the thermometer. Let's start with the word crisp. We use that for cool, fresh, invigorating air. The classic autumn morning.
A crisp day is all about low humidity and clear air. It's the total opposite of stagnant. The air feels sharp and clean when you breathe it in.
Right.
That lack of moisture means sound travels better, light feels brighter. It's cool enough to be refreshing, but the quality of the air itself makes it feel exhilarating.
It makes you feel alert.
Yeah.
Vital. It's the kind of day that makes a character in a book want to go for a long walk and think things through.
It's the feeling of energy. Now, contrast that with balmy.
Balmy. Totally different vibe. It's all about softness.
It's completely sensual, isn't it? It suggests a luxurious softness, a pleasant, mild summer evening. The air is warm, maybe a little humid, and it just conveys this sense of languid comfort.
Deep relaxation.
Yeah.
If a place is balmy, it's inviting you to slow down.
It implies a world where there's no struggle. Everything is safe and warm and easy.
And then, on the complete opposite end of that spectrum, you have biting.
Yeah.
Which is not just cold wind. This is a wind that feels physically painful.
It is. A biting wind is defined by its intensity, its ability to just get through your clothes. It feels so cold and sharp, it's like tiny needles on your skin.
You have an immediate physical reaction to it. You hunch your shoulders, you pull up your collar.
You're physically guarding yourself. It implies an immediate, urgent struggle against the elements. It's often used to signal a character's vulnerability.
And that single word choice, biting, loads the entire scene with that sense of struggle.
It does. But what about the feel of the air that's defined less by temperature and more by the moisture in it?
Okay. So you're talking about words like muggy or humid.
Exactly. They describe this heavy, oppressive quality. It's not just that it's hot, the air itself feels thick, saturated. It makes any physical effort feel 10 times harder.
Because the sweat can't evaporate from your skin.
Yeah.
You just feel sticky and drained.
And that has a huge psychological effect. Muggy weather contributes to irritability, to a sense of lethargy.
Like everything is in slow motion.
Yes. And in fiction, it's often used to symbolize a kind of slow burn tension, an environment where characters are physically oppressed, which mirrors their simmering anger or frustration.
It's the weather of delayed conflict. Everyone is too tired to fight, but they're all ready to snap.
That's a perfect way to put it. And the opposite of that oppressive moisture would be arid.
Extreme dryness.
Right. And unlike the invigorating crisp air, arid air is usually associated with heat, and more importantly, with a sense of parched vulnerability.
A lack of life. A desperate need for water.
It's the air of the desert, where life itself is a struggle. So if you place a character in an arid landscape, you immediately understand they are depleted, that they're fighting against desiccation.
There's another word we hear sometimes, especially in coastal areas or damp, cold places. The word raw.
Raw is such a visceral word. It's almost painful. It usually means a combination of cold and very high humidity, but it's not quite cold enough to be a biting wind.
It's that dampness that just sinks into your bones.
It does. It's that persistent, bone-chilling cold that even good insulation seems to struggle against. Narratively, it often suggests a deep, pervasive discomfort, maybe even poverty or ill health.
So if an author uses balmy, you're expecting romance or maybe some comfortable reflection. If they use raw, you know the character is going through a deep and persistent hardship.
Exactly. These subtle atmospheric adjectives are the core toolkit for setting narrative expectations.
They condense pages and pages of description into a single, highly textured word.
And mastering this vocabulary means you instantly recognize not just the temperature, but the entire atmospheric and psychological pressure being put on the characters.
Which is a perfect transition.
Yeah.
It's clear that this sensory input, the crispness, the howling, the rawness, it all directly influences our psychological state. So that leads us into our second section, connecting these external details to our internal emotional reality.
And we have to start by acknowledging the very common, very direct impact of, say, long periods of gray, overcast weather. For a lot of people, that shift in light and pressure can induce a state of lethargy or even melancholy.
It really is more than just a preference, isn't it? There's a tangible feeling of being slowed down, of having less mental energy when the sky is just this featureless gray for days on end.
Absolutely. And you mentioned pressure, which is a key point. The low barometric pressure that often comes with continuous rain can affect people physically. It can cause headaches, general sluggishness.
So the pervasive gloom just lowers your whole psychological baseline.
It can. The lack of visual stimulation alone contributes to a sense of monotony. But we have to transition the discussion from that general feeling of melancholy to a more clinical understanding.
Which is where seasonal affective disorder, or SATD, comes in.
Exactly. We need to define this clearly, to move from the subjective feeling to the objective medical reality.
Okay, so SAD is a medically recognized condition. And the sources are very clear that it is linked primarily to a persistent lack of enough natural light, especially during winter months.
That's the crucial distinction. We're not just talking about the winter blues. SAD is a type of depression with recurrent episodes that happen predictably, usually starting in late autumn and then going away in the spring.
And it all comes down to neurochemistry, right?
It does. There are specific neurological mechanisms that light manages. A lack of sunlight disrupts the body's internal clock, our circadian rhythm.
Which is managed in the brain.
Yes, in the hypothalamus.
Yeah.
And that reduced daylight leads to an overproduction of melatonin,
The sleep hormone.
the sleep hormone. So in people with SAD, that excess melatonin can linger all day, causing that persistent fatigue and lethargy. At the same time, the lack of light can interfere with serotonin,
Which is the mood stabilizer.
the mood stabilizer. So you have too much of the sleep chemical and not enough of the mood stabilizing chemical. It's a real physical imbalance.
So for anyone living in northern latitudes, where the daylight hours just shrink so dramatically in winter, that feeling of being profoundly down because of the gloomy weather it's a documented psychological reality. It's rooted in neurochemistry.
Precisely. And understanding that is so powerful. When someone says their low mood is because of the gloomy weather, you can recognize that for them, that external environment is having a verified, significant internal effect. It validates their experience.
It also means that when you read a novel set in a perpetually cloudy, damp city, that's not just background scenery.
No, it's an active physiological pressure on the characters who live there.
It even shapes entire cultures, doesn't it? I'm thinking of how some cultures deal with long, dark winters, the Scandinavian idea of hygge.
Coziness and comfort.
Yeah, or just the focus on getting as much light as you can, even when it's cold. Those are cultural coping mechanisms against the psychological weight of darkness.
The environment is actively creating an emotional state, which then requires a deliberate cultural response to counter it. It's a fascinating feedback loop.
But if that perpetual gloom is depressing, the sudden arrival of light can be just as powerful in the other direction.
Oh, profoundly restorative.
Yeah, the sources talk about that instantaneous uplifting effect, a sudden break in the clouds.
And you feel it instantly, don't you? That sudden flood of light, the shift from gray to blue. We hear people say it all the time. The sun finally came out and it instantly lifted my spirits.
It's an involuntary positive reaction.
It literally shifts your body's energy level by signaling wakefulness and cutting down on that melatonin production.
We also use weather to create states of anticipation, that feeling of waiting for something to happen. The atmosphere itself can be a kind of dramatic forecast.
This is where weather becomes a master of suspense. Just think about that feeling of foreboding you get from the eerie calm right before a major storm.
Oh yeah, the air goes completely still.
The humidity spikes, the silence feels thick and unnatural.
The atmosphere is holding its breath.
It is, and we know instinctively that this unnatural calm is not peace. It's the charged moment before the chaos. The stillness is the warning.
And then on the complete opposite end of that emotional spectrum, you have the feeling of renewal.
The world after a cleansing rain.
Which brings us right back to petrichor.
Exactly. The rain has washed away all the dust and grime. The petrichor is in the air. Everything looks sharper, greener, more vibrant.
The light seems brighter.
And that feeling of renewal is used constantly in narratives to symbolize a clean slate. A moral resolution, a character finally finding clarity after a stormy period in their life.
The physical rebirth of the world signals a psychological rebirth for the character.
The weather is providing this entire palette for our emotional shifts.
Yeah.
And that systematic link between the external world and our internal state. Well, that leads us directly to one of the most essential concepts in all of narrative art.
And this is where authors and filmmakers really start to deliberately exploit this connection we all feel.
Yes. They're using a specific, powerful rhetorical tool that, once you learn to spot it, you'll see absolutely everywhere.
Okay, let's get into the core literary term then, the pathetic fallacy. It sounds very academic.
It does, but the concept itself is incredibly intuitive. It relies entirely on the shared emotional language of weather that we've been discussing.
So what's the specific definition?
The pathetic fallacy is the act of ascribing human emotions, specifically human feelings, to nature or to inanimate objects. The pathetic part comes from the Greek word pathos, which means emotion or suffering.
And the fallacy part is because nature doesn't actually feel those things.
Exactly. The sky isn't actually cheerful. The wind isn't literally mourning. So when a story talks about a cruel winter or a cheerless sky or a brooding mountain, that's the pathetic fallacy at work.
Or taking our own feelings and projecting them onto the landscape.
We are. And it's important to make a little distinction here between pathetic fallacy and general personification.
Okay, this is the kind of nuance our listeners love. Break it down for us.
So all pathetic fallacy is a form of personification, but not all personification is pathetic fallacy.
Right.
Personification is just giving any human quality or action to a non-human thing. For example, the river ran quickly. Rivers don't run, people do. But running is an action, not an emotion.
Okay, got it.
But if you say the river wept its way to the sea, now you've assigned a specific human emotion, grief, sorrow to the river. That's the pathetic fallacy. It requires that projection of human feeling.
That makes perfect sense.
Okay.
And it's so powerful because it sets the emotional stage immediately and subtly. It tells you how you should feel about a scene before a character even says a word.
It's an effective anchor. It orients your emotional response right away.
The real brilliance of it, for me, is how it lets an author externalize a character's internal state without being clumsy about it. It uses the environment as an emotional mirror.
Let's run through some of those classic examples.
Okay, example 1, conflict and rage. A character is dealing with immense inner turmoil, a betrayal, a crisis of conscience, and what's happening outside.
A violent thunderstorm, a raging gale. The storm isn't just background noise. It is a direct mirror of their internal anger, their despair.
The storm externalizes the chaos.
Yes. If a character is just sitting silently in a room, consumed by rage, the story could stall. But if the author writes that the heavens screamed and the wind smashed against the panes, you feel the intensity of the character's breakdown.
The crack of thunder becomes the sound of their psyche breaking.
And you see this everywhere, from Shakespeare, where storms mirror cosmic and political disorder, all the way to modern thrillers.
Okay, example 2, despair and grief. We've touched on this already, but a bleak, wintry landscape is just a universal code for despair, isn't it?
It's shorthand for emotional barrenness or death. Think of how many tragic novels open with something like, "The frozen ground lay hard beneath a sky the color of old ash."
You feel the cold just reading that.
The lack of life, the cold, the barrenness, it all translates directly into the protagonist's emotional state. The author is leveraging our deep, culturally ingrained aversion to cold and darkness to communicate suffering. The setting is the emotion.
And what about something like fog? That's a really specific type of weather.
Fog is a remarkable tool for the pathetic fallacy. It almost always signals confusion, moral ambiguity, or a deliberate obfuscation of the truth.
Like in a mystery novel.
Exactly. Charles Dickens famously used this oppressive, impenetrable fog in his novel Bleak House. It wasn't just weather, it was a symbol for the entire British legal system. Confusing, slow, and impossible to see through. The weather was the character of the system.
That's brilliant. Okay, so on the flip side, example 3, hope and renewal.
Here, the atmospheric shift signals the character's internal resolution.
So a blooming spring morning after a long winter.
Or the sun suddenly breaking through the clouds, the fog lifting. It might symbolize hope, a new beginning, moral clarity. The character is emerging from their dark period just as the landscape is emerging from winter.
The physical rebirth of the world signals the psychological rebirth of the individual.
The light is literally cutting through the psychological gloom.
The power of this is that it's a universal code. Once you understand it, you see it everywhere. Books, movies, songs, even in the news.
Let's look at that one specific quote from our sources. "The desolate moor, shrouded in mist, reflected his own sense of isolation."
Right.
Notice the precision. The author doesn't say the character felt isolated. The author assigns the desolation directly to the landscape. The moor is desolate. By putting the character there, the reader understands that the environment and the emotional state are one and the same.
It's an incredible economy of language.
It really is. It's the ultimate example of show, don't tell. Instead of telling you a character is sad, show them walking through a cold, persistent drizzle. You'll feel it much more deeply.
Which brings us to our last section. We've been up in the atmospheric heights of literature. But this language is also right here on the ground, embedded in our most common, everyday idioms.
Yes. And these are the phrases that, when you use them naturally, really signal that conversational fluency. They show how deeply our environment shapes the metaphors we use for human interaction.
Okay, let's start with a classic, one that's all about social grace. To take a rain check. We all know what it means. It's a polite way to turn down an offer, but with the clear implication that you want to do it later.
But the origin is so literal and specific, it comes from 19th century American baseball.
Right.
If you bought a ticket and the game got rained out before it was official, they would give you a physical ticket, a rain check, that would let you come to a future game for free.
So when you say, "Can I take a rain check on dinner tonight?"
Yeah.
You're metaphorically saying, "The current conditions aren't right, but please hold that ticket for me. I fully intend to use it later."
And that's such a critical social tool. It's so much softer than a flat no. It preserves the relationship and signals genuine, if delayed, interest.
Absolutely. Okay, next one. This one is wonderfully descriptive. A face like thunder.
Pure visual and auditory communication. It means someone looks visibly furious, intensely angry.
And the metaphor works because thunder is loud, it's intimidating, and it usually precedes something destructive.
So when someone walks into a room with a face like thunder, their expression is dark, their brow is furrowed, their whole demeanor is stormy and threatening, you know instantly that the social atmosphere has just shifted.
The threat is palpable. You don't need to ask what's wrong.
No, the idiom communicates the severity of the situation faster than any explanation could. If your boss comes back to the office with a face like thunder, you just know.
And on a much more positive note, we have to be a breeze.
The linguistic opposite of struggling. If a task is a breeze, it means it was incredibly easy to do.
Because a breeze is gentle, it's effortless, there's no resistance.
Exactly. It's the opposite of battling a biting wind or pushing through muggy air.
So you might say, I was worried about that exam, but it turned out to be a breeze.
It just emphasizes ease and speed, and you can apply it to anything, a physical task, an intellectual challenge, even a social situation. The meeting with the new clients was a breeze. It means there was no stress, it was effortless and comfortable.
We should probably add a few more to this list to really arm our listeners. What about an idiom for optimism?
Oh, the classic. Every cloud has a silver lining.
Right. Even a bad situation has some good aspect to it.
It's an insistence on optimism. It comes from the way the sun will often light up the edges of a dark rain cloud, creating that bright outline. It's a visual metaphor for hope existing even in a dark moment.
A phrase you use to console someone going through a tough time.
Definitely. And speaking of tough times, there's a vital one for perseverance. To weather the storm.
That one has to be nautical in origin.
It absolutely is. For a ship, to weather a storm literally means to survive high winds and heavy seas without sinking.
So metaphorically, it means to endure a period of great difficulty or danger and come out the other side intact.
It implies resilience, fortitude. You hear it a lot in business. The company managed to weather the economic storm. It means they hunkered down, made tough choices, and survived the crisis.
It's so much more powerful than just saying they survived. It gives it a heroic quality.
It does.
How about an idiom that speaks to impracticality?
That would be to have one's head in the clouds.
Ah, of course. To be a daydreamer.
Someone who is impractical, focused on fantasy instead of reality. Clouds are beautiful and lofty, but they offer no solid ground. They're ephemeral.
It suggests a kind of detachment, like he's a brilliant strategist, but he always has his head in the clouds when it comes to the budget.
It's a gentle critique, usually. It suggests they're thinking big, beautiful thoughts, but that they're disconnected from the ground level reality of the situation.
So all these idioms really show that weather isn't just an external phenomenon. It's deeply woven into how we talk about our social lives, our emotions, and the difficulty of our tasks.
It's our shared metaphorical currency. From managing social plans to judging a boss's mood, the atmosphere gives us the words we need.
Which I think brings us to a good place to synthesize all of this.
It's been a vast, textured territory we've covered today. We started with the very specific sensory detail of petrichor.
Anchored in the chemistry of geosmin.
Right. Then we move through the complex vocabulary of sound and feel, from a soughing wind to raw air.
Then up to the literary heights with the pathetic fallacy.
And finally, we grounded ourselves back in those indispensable idioms like weather the storm.
And the main takeaway, I think, is that the language we use for the atmosphere is not just decorative. It's profoundly functional.
It's an emotional shortcut. It informs us about psychological states like SAD, it foreshadows events in a story, and it underpins our most common social metaphors.
And this is what we mean by the pinnacle of fluency. It's about communicating not just information, it's raining, but mood, emotion, and deep cultural subtext.
You now have the tools to decode those deeper layers of meaning that are hidden in a simple description of the rain or the wind.
So for our final challenge to you, the listener, we want you to really internalize that principle we talked about in the literary section.
Use weather to show an emotional state instead of just stating it. This is the real difference between good writing and powerful writing.
So if you're thinking about a memory, whether it's difficult or happy, try not to just write, I was very sad, or I was overjoyed.
Those phrases they stop the reader's imagination. They force them to just accept your assertion without feeling it themselves.
Instead, try to use a descriptive sensory approach. Use the vocabulary we've talked about. Think about how much more powerful this is. Instead of, I felt depressed, try to capture that feeling through the atmosphere.
Something like, A persistent cold drizzle fell from a featureless gray sky, and the day seemed to sigh along with me.
That sentence conveys sadness, lethargy, despair, but it never uses those words. It invites you to feel the scene.
The weather is doing all the emotional heavy lifting for you. So your mission now is to take these techniques, the crispness, the howling, the foreboding calm, and use them to create evocative descriptions in your own thinking, your own communication.
Just observe the weather outside your window right now, and then observe how you're feeling. See if you can merge the two with this rich vocabulary.
And the next time you're watching a movie or reading a book and a storm rolls in, don't just notice the storm. Ask yourself, is that wind howling a tragedy, or is it just whistling a warning?
That question will open up the entire narrative for you in a completely new way.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us.
Until next time, keep observing the world and the deep, resonant language that brings it all to life.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're going to be taking your source material today, which is, well, it's a fantastic masterclass on the language of weather and really pushing it to the next level.
Yes, and if you've been following along with the material, you've already absorbed some pretty sophisticated ideas.
Oh, absolutely.
You already know that the earthy sand after a dry spell of rain is called petrichor. You get the concept of the pathetic fallacy, that powerful literary trick of giving human emotions to the natural world.
Right.
So this means you've moved past just describing the weather. Now you're really equipped to start analyzing it.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Our mission for this deep dive is to take that knowledge and, well, solidify it. We want to move you from someone who knows a lot of advanced vocabulary to what your sources call a true conversational artist.
And that's a crucial distinction. We're not really focused on definitions anymore.
No, this is about application, profound application, actually. We're exploring how weather isn't just a sort of footnote to life. It's a fundamental, incredibly powerful force that shapes our personal identity. It drives, genuinely nuanced debate, and it fuels these compelling, critical stories about the future we all have to share.
The core challenge, really, at this level is synthesis. It's about consolidating all this expansive knowledge so that you can pivot.
Pivot seamlessly.
Yes, seamlessly.
Yeah.
So you can go from an introspective personal story to a high-stakes global discourse without missing a beat.
And that's the key, isn't it? The idea that these things are connected.
They're absolutely connected. We have to remember that the most critical conversations we have about culture, about survival, about societal resilience, they often find their starting point in something as universally accessible as the atmosphere right above us.
So we're connecting the specialized language of the sky
Directly to the nuanced language of human experience. That's the goal.
So where do we start? Let's begin with an idea that your sources frame as weather as biography. It's a pretty provocative and deeply personal concept.
It is.
It suggests this radical idea that the climate of the place you call home might fundamentally define you, your character, your habits, your core identity.
And this brings us right to a formal academic concept called environmental determinism.
Right, I've heard of this.
It's a theory it has historical roots going back centuries. And it posits that the physical environment, so the climate, the geography, the terrain, is the primary driver.
The primary driver.
Primary, maybe even the sole driver in shaping human cultures, social structures, technological advancement, and yes, even individual temperament.
Wow. So in its purest form, it's saying where you are dictates who you are.
To a very large extent, yes. That's the core assertion.
Okay, that sounds incredibly rigid and honestly a little bit reductive. If we're going to use this as a high-level talking point, we have to be careful.
We do.
Your sources are right to note that environmental determinism is, it's highly controversial in modern academic circles. So if we're aiming for a really high-level debate, we can't just throw that term out there. Why is it so controversial, and why should we still care about it?
That's the critical distinction we have to make for this level of fluency. The historical problem with environmental determinism is its tendency toward what you call cultural reductionism.
It oversimplifies things.
Massively. It takes incredibly complex historical and social developments like economic success or political structures, and it attributes them solely to climate. It completely ignores human agency, migration, technology, political history, all of it.
And it's been misused in the past, right?
Oh, absolutely. Unfortunately, it has been used to justify certain, let's say, geopolitical narratives.
So if the theory is, fundamentally flawed in its original all-encompassing form, why are we dedicating a whole section of this deep dive to it? Doesn't globalization just kind of negate the whole idea that your location dictates your identity?
That's a great question. And the answer is, we use it, as your sources suggest, not as a scientific doctrine. We're not saying it's fact.
Okay.
We're using it as a powerful comparative lens.
A lens.
A lens for viewing language and cultural attitudes, especially toward risk and difficulty. We're examining the linguistic imprint that the climate leaves on a culture. It gives us a framework to analyze why certain cultures develop specific idioms or why they value certain traits.
So it's a tool for self-reflection and for comparing languages and cultures.
Exactly. It's a starting point for a fascinating conversation.
Okay, that clarifies its utility. So let's apply this lens. Let's look at the 2 core case studies from the material, starting with the effect of warm, consistent climates.
Right. So think about the archetypal regions that are just defined by consistent, reliable warmth. The coastal Mediterranean or some subtropical zone.
Paradise, basically.
Right. Well, the environmental message there is one of predictability. It's benevolent. There's much less immediate threat from the elements, and survival requires, less intense preparation or infrastructure.
And how does that translate culturally and linguistically? What's the imprint it leaves?
This predictable, mild climate often fosters a more sanguine cultural outlook.
Sanguine, meaning optimistic, cheerful.
Exactly. And that outlook is just easier to maintain when the environment is consistently supportive. If the growing season is long, if basic shelter is enough all year round, if outdoor life is always an option, the prevailing cultural narrative tends toward immediacy, social connection, a kind of lightness.
And what does that look like in the language? It can't just be that people say she has a sunny disposition more often.
No, it's deeper than that. The sources suggest we look at the frequency of complaint. In these climates, when conversation turns to the weather, it's often an appreciation.
Or if it is a complaint, it's about something temporary.
Exactly. It's too humid today, or this quick shower ruined my plans. The language focuses on the present moment, on aesthetics, and on these temporary interruptions to a baseline at ease.
And that must change the whole structure of social life.
It does. Time itself is often perceived as more fluid. And the language, it favors metaphors of light and openness and warmth. We talk about bright ideas, shedding light on a subject, or warming up to an idea.
So the baseline expectation for how humans and the environment interact is positive.
Yes, and the language reflects that embedded optimism. It's baked in.
Okay, so now let's pivot. Let's look at the counter-argument, the cultural response that's forged in these harsh, unpredictable climates.
Right. Think of wind-battered Northern Europe, or regions defined by extreme cold, or the volatile conditions of the American Midwest tornado alley.
Very different places.
Very. And here, the environmental message is one of necessary struggle. It's one of constant vigilance. Survival is completely predicated on long-term planning, on collective effort, and a really deep respect for the volatility of the elements.
And that constant struggle gets woven into the cultural story, the narrative.
It does, and it's characterized by 2 key traits, resilience and, maybe even more importantly, stoicism.
And that stoicism isn't just about not showing emotion. It's an emotional energy conservation, right?
That's a great way to put it.
If you have to face severe storms or blizzards every single year, being in a state of high-level alarm constantly is just...
Yeah.
It's not sustainable.
It's exhausting. And that necessity translates into a very specific, often dry, understated linguistic habit.
Which brings us to that quintessential example from the sources, the rugged fisherman on some windswept island who says, "It's a bit fresh out there."
In the middle of a raging gale, yes.
Yeah.
We really need to spend some time on why that simple statement is just, is conversational gold at this level.
Because it's not just a colorful bit of dialogue, it's a profound assertion of control.
Explain that.
Well, by minimizing the terrifying power of the gale, calling life-threatening conditions merely fresh, he's asserting his own unflappable nature. He's communicating, without any bragging, I am a person who handles this chaos daily. This is just Tuesday for me.
And the linguistic mastery is embedded in the shared implicit knowledge.
Yes.
Everyone there understands how severe the gale is. So an explicit declaration of danger isn't just unnecessary, it would be. What would be strange?
Weak, almost.
Almost. The understatement acts as a kind of social currency. It demonstrates resilience and this shared mastery over a volatile environment.
And you see this pattern repeated linguistically in idioms that focus on endurance. Things like grit your teeth or ride it out, make do.
The language itself is often stripped down. It favors direct verbs over, elaborate adjectives. It mirrors the necessity of efficient communication when high winds or icy conditions demand absolute focus.
So by using this lens of environmental determinism, and again, purely as a cultural framework.
That is a hard science.
Right. You can analyze a simple phrase and connect it to centuries of environmental adaptation. You move the conversation from, oh, that's a funny thing to say, to that statement is a profound expression of cultural identity and mastery over risk.
Precisely.
And that prepares us beautifully for the ultimate question, the one sourced directly from the material, that forces this kind of introspection on the listener.
How do you think the climate where you grew up has shaped your own personality or worldview?
Exactly. That's the link between the environment and the biography. It forces you to use this very specific descriptive language we've just been discussing, not just about the weather, but about your own resulting psychological makeup.
So you grew up in a place defined by these cyclical, harsh winters. Did that instill a particular discipline in you or patience? Did it train you to anticipate scarcity and prepare meticulously?
Or, on the other hand, if you grew up where sudden, intense downpours were common, did that make you more adaptable? Or maybe it encouraged a sense of, fatalism about making future plans.
Analyzing our own environmental bias is the critical first step to having this conversation at a high level.
Okay, so that brings us to the next section. We're transitioning from personal reflection, analyzing our own biases and resilience, to interaction, to debate.
And the sources highlight a major conversational trap here.
Which is that weather small talk almost always defaults to simple agreement.
Always. Terrible day, isn't it?
Yes, awful. And the conversation just dies. It's conversational white noise.
It's a mechanism for social bonding, and that's fine, but it is an intellectual dead end.
Right. So the advanced skill here is to transform that low-stakes complaint into a genuine exchange of competing ideas.
And the weather is, ironically, the absolute safest arena to practice the highly challenging art of intellectual disagreement.
That's such a good point. The stakes are delightfully low. You're not challenging someone's deeply held political or religious beliefs.
You're just challenging their aesthetic or their emotional response to a shared experience.
And if you can master the technique of polite contradiction here, you can apply it absolutely anywhere.
The methodology is key. The sources call it the technique of disagreement. And the crucial first step is to use a kind of intellectual empathy. You have to acknowledge the validity of the other person's point before you present your contrary view.
So you validate their experience first.
You do. And that validates them as a person, while at the same time carving out legitimate space for your own different perspective.
Okay, let's get practical. Let's revisit that classic role-play scenario that the sources outline. The initial complaint is almost always purely negative.
Yes. I can't stand this incessant rain. It's so depressing and it just makes everything feel dreary.
Okay. So how do we elevate the response?
You have to introduce complexity. You have to find value where the other person only sees negativity. You have to reframe the entire experience.
Starting with acknowledgement.
Always.
Yeah.
So the sophisticated counterpoint begins with, I can certainly understand why you'd feel that way, especially if you had plans to be outdoors, but I actually find this rain quite restorative.
That one word, restorative, it immediately shifts the whole axis of the conversation.
It does.
You've just reframed the rain from an agent of depression to an agent of renewal, of growth, of psychological replenishment.
But the source material doesn't just stop there. What if? What if the listener doesn't find it restorative?
Yeah.
We need more options for this reframe.
Good point.
Absolutely. So let's look at two other high-level options for disagreement. First, there's what we could call the productive frame.
Okay.
You could respond, I hear you. The gray sky does weigh on the spirit, but for me, this weather is an incredible opportunity for focus. I find it deeply conducive to work and reflection.
I like that. So the rain isn't just cozy, which is a bit simple. It's actively facilitating intellectual effort. The focus is on productivity.
Precisely. Then there's the second option, the aesthetic frame.
The aesthetic frame.
So you could say, I agree the relentlessness can be taxing, but have you noticed the light reflecting off the wet pavement? I find the sound of it lashing down outside to be profoundly meditative.
Okay, so here you're acknowledging the difficulty. Use the word relentlessness, but you're elevating the sensory experience to an aesthetic or even a spiritual plane.
You are. And the real advanced skill here is recognizing that the emotional choice you make, whether it's restorative, conducive, or meditative, that choice is inherently a sign of linguistic mastery over the environment.
You're demonstrating agency.
Exactly. You're choosing how the weather impacts you rather than just being passively subjected to it.
And there's a huge difference between saying, I find the rain cozy, and I find the sound of it lashing down to be profoundly meditative.
It's the precision of the vocabulary, and it's the demonstration of a deliberate psychological frame. You're forcing the other person to consider that their subjective experience is not the only universal truth.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a second. Isn't this just arguing for the sake of arguing? Why is this such a valuable skill for a serious debate?
Because it teaches the most crucial skill in any intellectual discussion: separating subjective feeling from objective reality.
Go on.
When someone says, the rain is depressing, they are conflating a subjective emotional state, their depression, with an objective meteorological event, the rain.
And when you counter politely,
You are teaching yourself, and perhaps them, to distinguish between the physical reality and the emotional overlay. And that skill is invaluable when you start discussing much higher stakes issues later on.
Okay, so to formalize this, the sources provide these structured phrases for polite contradiction. These are like the intellectual scaffolding that makes sure respect is maintained, no matter what the topic is.
Yes, we have to master openers like, that's one way of looking at it, and I respect that perspective, but I tend to see the broader benefits differently.
That structure is great. It signals respect, it avoids invalidating the other person, and then it clearly marks a departure in perspective.
Or you can introduce an aesthetic counterpoint. On the contrary, while many find winter bleak, I find the sheer starkness of a winter landscape to be quite beautiful and dramatically simplified.
I love that. You're not denying the cold or the difficulty, you're just highlighting an overlooked value starkness, which implies purity or clarity or a powerful simplicity. You're using the language to redirect their focus.
And for more direct assertion, we have the language of formal debate.
I respectfully disagree.
Exactly. I respectfully disagree. I think a strong, intense heat wave is genuinely invigorating. By using that phrase, I respectfully disagree, you invoke the structure of intellectual exchange, which elevates your opinion.
And you're defending the heat wave not as just hot, but as invigorating. It suggests the challenge itself provides energy or strength. It's a linguistic echo of that stoicism we talked about earlier.
It is. So the ultimate synthesis of this section is realizing that mastering this kind of nuanced disagreement about rain, it prepares you for the critical conversations about the viability and the ramifications of climate change.
You're learning how to assert a perspective based on reframed evidence, respectfully, in what can be a very challenging environment. Okay, we've established how weather influences who we are, our identity, and how we interact debate. Now we need to make the essential shift. We're moving into the critical future tense.
And this is where high-level discourse truly begins. It's centered on climate change, projections, and critical concern.
This is a big transition. It's not just about changing our vocabulary.
No, it's about changing the very framework of the discussion. We have to move beyond simple meteorological prediction, it'll be 25 degrees tomorrow, to discussing projections, climate modeling, and long-term ramifications.
And that requires fluency in concepts of scientific uncertainty and systemic risk.
Let's add the technical depth here that the sources promise. The listener needs to really understand the difference between the daily weather forecast and the long-term climate projection. That difference dictates the language we have to use.
Right, so a meteorological forecast. That's a specific prediction over a short time frame. Days, maybe a week.
Yes, and it's based on immediate atmospheric conditions and high-resolution models. Its language can be quite certain. There's an 80% chance of showers at 3 p.m.
Whereas a climate projection that deals with changes in long-term atmospheric patterns, we're talking decades or even centuries.
And it's based on climate modeling, which simulates these incredibly complex interactions between the atmosphere, oceans, ice, and land under various emissions scenarios.
So the language here has to be different. It has to be probabilistic, conditional.
Exactly. Models suggest a 2 to 4 degree temperature rise by 2100, with severe ramifications for agriculture.
And mastering this distinction prevents those really simplistic errors, like using a single cold snap in winter to try and refute a long-term warming projection.
It requires language that handles high-stakes topics with precision and it absolutely requires recognizing scientific uncertainty.
Okay, let's do the deep dive now into the 4 critical vocabulary terms highlighted for this kind of discourse. And let's make sure we understand their weight when we use them in these high-stakes contexts. We won't just define them.
No, let's apply them. Let's apply them to a single escalating scenario. What about the threat to global food security caused by heat instability?
That's perfect. So we begin with the word spate. The definition is a large number of similar things coming in quick succession.
Right.
In our food security scenario, we would use spate to describe a pattern of abnormal events that are impacting growing cycles. You wouldn't say, we had a few weird weather events this year. You'd say, the agricultural sector is grappling with an increasing spate of early frosts followed by intense late-season heat domes, which is making crop planting nearly impossible.
See, the word spate instantly conveys urgency and momentum. It signals that this isn't just random bad luck.
It's a pattern.
It's a concentrated sequence that demonstrates an underlying pattern of volatility. It suggests the system is, well, it's breaking down.
Okay, next let's incorporate viability, defined as the ability to work successfully or to survive.
When you're discussing something like food security, viability is a very heavy term. We're moving from discussing yields to discussing existential threats.
So applying it to our scenario.
You'd say something like, if this spate of heat instability continues, experts are questioning the long-term economic viability of growing staple crops like corn and soy in historically fertile regions.
Wow. Yeah, that moves the conversation from market fluctuation to systemic collapse. You're questioning whether the current agricultural system can continue to function successfully under this new environmental reality. It's a profoundly serious term.
And that leads us directly to ramifications, defined as the complex, unwelcome consequences of an action or an event.
The power of the word ramifications is that it acknowledges complexity. It's about the ripple effect. The direct consequence of crop instability is a lower yield. The ramifications are global and they're multi-layered.
So for our scenario, the full statement would sound something like this. The immediate loss of a major crop is concerning, but the ramifications are far broader. They include rapid destabilization of global commodity markets, increased geopolitical tension in areas that depend on food imports, and potentially mass migration from regions that can no longer sustain their populations.
So using the word ramifications forces the speaker to connect the dots. It shows that you understand the interlocking nature of environmental, economic, and social systems.
You're demonstrating comprehensive analysis, not just surface-level observation.
And finally, we integrate cause for concern, which is a reason to worry, but it's grounded in objective data.
And this phrase is a powerful anchor because it moves the dialogue away from personal anxiety and toward evidence-based worry. You're not just saying, I'm panicking about the future.
Right, you're saying.
You're saying, given the convergence of these volatile projections and the clear spate of extreme events, the ongoing degradation of global supply chains presents a significant cause for concern for every major government.
So by applying all 4 of those terms to one single scenario, a threat to agriculture, we're demonstrating mastery over high-stakes discourse.
You're using language that is precise, it's grounded in evidence, and it's appropriately grave without being, overly alarmist.
But let's explore the language of scientific uncertainty a little more, because that's essential when you're engaging with climate modeling. How do we phrase our concerns when the data is, as the sources say, deeply unsettling, but the final outcome is still conditional?
The key is to integrate hedging language that reflects the scientific community's own caution. So instead of stating coastal cities will be underwater, which sounds alarmist and fails to acknowledge any uncertainty.
You use modal verbs and careful qualifiers.
Yes. For instance, if current emissions trajectories continue, models strongly suggest that sea level rise may escalate beyond previous upper estimates, challenging the long-term viability of metropolitan coastal infrastructure.
Let's break that down. Strongly suggest acknowledges the model's reliability, but it stops short of a definitive prediction.
And may escalate indicates probability, not certainty. This language shows the listener that you are engaging with the material as a synthesis of data and probability, rather than just accepting a simple binary outcome.
It's a discourse that handles complex systems with maturity.
It is. And when you can utilize spate, viability, ramifications, and cause for concern to structure a conversation about future environmental changes, and then temper those statements with the appropriate language of scientific uncertainty, you've achieved the necessary fluency to contribute meaningfully to the world's most critical discussion.
So we've discussed the psychology of weather, the debate, the future discourse. Now we reach what the sources call the final synthesis of all these skills: storytelling.
This is the ultimate test of conversational fluency, where the weather isn't merely a setting, but it's a full-fledged character in the drama.
Right. True mastery means weaving the environment right into the plot, making sure it influences the mood, or it dictates the action, or symbolizes the emotional arc of the story.
Exactly. If a character makes a difficult decision, the weather should reflect that, or challenge it, or maybe even force that decision.
So if you just say, "It was snowing when they met," you've failed the test.
You failed.
But if you say, "The biting, relentless snow was an accurate mirror for the man's own internal frost, sealing him off from the possibility of connection," then you've succeeded.
Yes. And the sources detail 4 essential narrative elements that have to be woven into this kind of structure.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, we need sensory language. The listener has to feel and hear and smell the weather. We have to move beyond just generic adjectives.
So we have to ask, what does the wind do? It doesn't just blow.
No, it whistles through the cracks, it buffets the car, it's biting and sharp.
A cold day isn't just cold, the cold is snapping. That suggests a kind of brittleness and danger.
And the sources really emphasize the sense of smell. It's not just wet, it's the smell of ozone crackling in the air before a lightning strike, or that heavy, metallic scent of impending sleet.
Using these specific, evocative sensory details, it anchors the story in reality, and it ensures the weather is a palpable force.
It transitions the description from just being background information to being an active environment.
Okay, what's the second element?
Second, we require psychological impact. And this is the practical application of that pathetic fallacy concept we discussed earlier. You have to demonstrate how the weather mirrors an internal state or shapes a character's reaction.
So if a character is feeling confused,
Instead of saying the character was confused, you describe the environment. The city was swallowed by a dense, disorienting fog, muffling the sounds of the street and making every direction feel equally arbitrary, mirroring her own profound indecision about which path to take.
the fog isn't external, it's an extension of her mind. The external world is reflecting the internal struggle.
Exactly. Or if a character is finally facing a long-avoided painful truth, maybe the story takes place under a sudden blinding midday sun.
A sun that's relentless. It offers no shadows to hide in. It forces the revelation. The environment makes avoidance impossible.
Third, you have to integrate figurative language. This is where you smoothly incorporate the metaphors and idioms that are now second nature to you.
And this figurative language, it adds layers of meaning, and it can drive the story's pacing. If you start a scene with the idiom, "It was the calm before the storm,"
You are immediately signaling that there's imminent physical or emotional conflict. You don't need to explicitly tell the listener that danger is coming.
the weather idiom does the structural work for you. It instantly elevates the prose.
Or think of an idiom like, "he had his head in the clouds." If the character who is always dreaming and avoiding responsibility literally spends the whole scene trying to operate a machine on a high, cloud-covered peak.
The figurative language becomes physical reality. That creates irony and dramatic tension.
And the fourth and most critical element, the one that unites the previous three, is the narrative arc.
The weather has to play a direct instrumental role in how the story unfolds or resolves. It has to move the plot forward.
Let's delve a bit deeper into those illustrative scenarios the source material provides to see this causality in action. Let's take the one involving a difficult decision made during a blinding blizzard.
Okay, so in that story, the blizzard has to become the antagonist.
It has to. The physical difficulty of the storm mirrors the internal struggle, but more importantly, the storm has to actively limit the character's choices.
So perhaps the difficult decision is whether or not to leave town. The blizzard descends, it closes the only highway.
It cuts off the escape route. It makes procrastination impossible. The decision to stay or go is no longer hypothetical. It's now violently forced by the storm.
And the low visibility and the extreme cold become metaphors for the character's confusion and desperation.
Yes, the fight to keep the fire going, or the physical struggle of pushing through deep snow. That becomes a symbolic proxy for the internal struggle to find clarity or endure the consequences of the choice. The storm drives the action to its climax.
Okay, now for the counterpoint. The story of reconciliation that happens on the first balmy day of spring.
Here, the weather is the catalyst for hope. A balmy day. It's soft, mild, gentle, often with a hint of new growth. It provides the perfect psychological backdrop for emotional openness.
The transition from the harsh, closed-off nature of winter to the ease and accessibility of spring. It symbolizes a new beginning for the relationship.
Maybe they meet in a park where they had their last fight, which happened during an oppressive, sultry summer heat wave.
Where the high humidity made every word feel too heavy and every temper too frayed.
Exactly. And now, under the light, forgiving air of this balmy day, the literal warmth encourages an emotional thawing. It encourages reconciliation. It signals that the season of conflict is finally over.
By making sure the weather actively forces conflict, or limits choice, or provides that symbolic backdrop for a resolution, you transform the topic from just a superficial descriptor into a genuine character.
And the story becomes richer, more complex, and far more memorable. This is the synthesis of all your learning skills: vocabulary, nuance, structural awareness, applied to the highest form of communication.
This challenge really confirms that fluency isn't just about comprehension, it's about creation. When you can integrate weather as a narrative force, you are demonstrating complete mastery over the language and the sophisticated concepts we've explored today. So here we are at the conclusion of this deep dive, and just look at the distance we've traveled. We took the universally simple topic of weather, and we really elevated it.
You did.
We analyzed its power in shaping personal identity through that controversial but very useful lens of environmental determinism. We used it as the perfect low-stakes arena for mastering the art of nuanced, polite debate.
And we provided the precise, high-stakes vocabulary required to navigate the critical discourse of climate projections and long-term ramifications.
The core insight, which is so powerfully highlighted in your source material, is that truly simple topics, they just don't exist.
No. Even the weather contains these infinite layers of complexity, culture, psychology, and artistry. The mastery you've acquired isn't in reciting definitions. It's in understanding the psychological and social weight these words carry when they're applied to human experience.
And the true reward of this expertise is the ability to connect. It's about moving beyond conversational placeholders, learning how to express complex emotions, and understanding how to tell stories that resonate because they feel so deeply physically real.
This entire journey ensures that you are ready to engage in the most critical, informed conversations that are shaping our world today.
And that leads us to our final takeaway and a provocation for you, the listener.
You've absorbed the lessons on sensory language, psychological mirroring, figurative integration, and narrative arc. Your knowledge has advanced significantly, but the ultimate test is application. It's creation.
So we strongly encourage you to take on that final challenge mentioned in the source material.
Craft your own personal narrative, a short, detailed piece of prose, where the weather was not just a background setting, but an active, defining character that determined the story's outcome.
Prove to yourself how far your knowledge has truly advanced. Stay curious, speak with intention, and never, ever underestimate the depth hidden in the seemingly simplest of conversations. That's all for this deep dive.